success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Realtor Growth listeners. Today I have Pete Sena. So I always love it before I get on mic. But we have a little talk back and forth, getting on, and maybe it's just like maybe it's all of us, right? As soon as someone says you're not supposed to say my name like this, or you're not supposed to say the word like this, you start thinking in your head. You're like, don't say it like this. Don't say it like this. Don't say it like this. And so I think I was gonna say it right, Pete. And then you said Cena. You're like, some people say it Cena. I was like, oh, John Cena. Oh, yeah. And then I started going down Peacemaker. Oh, that was a good TV show. Oh, man. I was like, oh, I got to focus back. We got a podcast going. Yeah. Does that ever happen to you?
All the time, man. All the time. And the funny thing is, the reason I said Cena is because when some people say Cena, it's like, I am not the Peacemaker. I am not a WWE wrestler. I'm in branding and entrepreneurship. So, yeah, fun times.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to jump into this a little more, and then we're going to get into digital surgeons and all that kind of stuff. Did that mix up in your last name happen at a young age, or only when John Cena became famous?
I think only when John Cena became famous.
Okay. It happens. I mean, I've luckily the first name is very different from that. I've had some people on here that spell their name similar to other popular people, and it makes it very hard for branding, I can tell.
Yeah. Definitely not a challenge, but yeah, it's just funny the nuances we get ourselves into.
Oh yeah, I mean there's correlations to everything. You start putting words, you see, oh, I saw this over here. Okay, that means this, and you start bringing up all the back history of everything. Yeah, so fun times in consulting, and I bet you have to kind of deal with that a lot. Running a consulting company and all the other businesses you're part of. I know we talked about how you're a serial entrepreneur, and how much our attention span plays a factor in a lot of this stuff. So thank you, Pete, for being here. How would you describe yourself? Like if you're in an elevator, someone asks you, hey, Pete, what do you do? Mm-hmm. How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I mean, great question. So I think first and foremost, typically what I tell people is I'll ask them what they do, because I always lead with curiosity. My sort of big thing in business is I believe that creativity and curiosity in business are broken. Mm-hmm. So whether you're in the real estate industry, which I know you've had many wins and successes in, or you're the CEO of, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, whatever, you both have one thing in common, which is you want to grow your business, and you want to do what we like to call design demand, right? So we help businesses design demand. We use a flavor of marketing, branding, experience design, lots of sort of buzzwords, but the core crux is if I'm in an elevator and it's like I've got from now until the third floor before the bell rings. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you what you do. Here's sort of a quick thing about whatever industry it is. I've worked in, I think, over 50 industries at this point in my career. And I always tell people, I help people grow their businesses. And then people say, well, how do you do that? And then typically what I'll do is I'll ask them about something that they're facing, whether it's a customer growth challenge or retention challenge or product challenge. And then from there, I'll start to, with metaphor and examples and case studies, walk them through how we've done that for similar industries. But really at the most core level, I help people grow their businesses.
Okay. Again, listeners, we're going to get into Pete's story, but I want to dive a little farther into that communication. So if someone were to say to you, Pete, go, hey, Pete, what do you do? Would you say, I help people grow their businesses? What do you do? Or do you not even give that first part of it and just kind of push to see what they do?
I almost always sort of want to understand more about who I'm talking to, because what I find is that the vernacular is so different. So, for example, one of the clients I was on a call with today, they're a Fortune 50 manufacturing company, a name and brand that you would know if I was able to say it. If I'm talking to that stakeholder, the language and the words that they use is so different from when I'm advising a startup founder that might be launching an online product that's like direct to consumer with Shopify or whatever. So I always want to learn my audience, because what I always tell people is whatever kind of story you're telling someone, understanding and meeting them where they're at is really important. So the vernacular you use is different, because if I say, hey, I help people grow their businesses, it's like, well, what does that mean? And it creates a question, which then creates a conversation. And I believe that conversations create commerce, but those conversations really have to be, have a reciprocity component to it.
Well, let's, if we could, do a quick role play just to get into the conversation.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
I'm very intrigued to see how you transition that, how you judo the person into putting it back on them. Right.
Yeah.
So, oh, we have great weather here. So what do you do, Pete?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, like, what brings you to this conference and this podcast? Like, what line of work are you in?
So would that be in like, so that means I think how you're phrasing it means that we're already kind of there. Okay, so you kind of not really give them anything. You kind of just kind of push back on them with a smile, I guess, right?
I mean, sometimes a little bit, but like sometimes I like if it's like if I'm in a bar sometimes and someone
Yeah,
goes, "What do you do?" I'll look at their shirt and I'll see a logo on their shirt. In your case, the logo on the hat, and
yeah.
I'll say, "Oh, you got a Lacoste shirt on right now, right?" "Oh yeah, I love Lacoste." Yeah, well, I've done a lot of work in retail and apparel brands. I'm doing a lot in the work around branding and marketing and helping people grow their businesses and brands. Oh, that's kind of cool. Tell me more about that. And I'll say, "Oh, well, yeah, when I worked with Sperry, the footwear brand. Oh, I know Sperry. Yeah, well, we helped them with their whole digital transformation program." "Oh, digital transformation. What does that mean?" "Well, right now, where'd you buy your Sperry's or where'd you buy your shoes?" "Oh, well, I bought them on Zappos or I bought them on Amazon or I
Mm,
bought them at this store." "Oh, the reason that you saw that social ad and that ad that made you want to buy it on Instagram, that's a lot of the work that me and my company at Digital Surgeons does." "Oh, that makes total sense." And then I'll sort of go a little bit deeper. "Tell me more about you and your business." And then it's really relatable. I mean, I've had conversations with people on ski lifts that have turned into, $100,000 deals. I've had conversations with people that I've ended up being on their board of directors or advising them. And I think that taking that really human first approach and like not looking to just project yourself onto somebody, I think is
mm.
really important. Understanding more about meet people where they're at. That's sort of where like I think the story is more or less relevant to you. Because if I come in and say, "Hey, I'm a design driven entrepreneur and founder, and I help people transform their businesses through demand design," you'd be like, "What does that mean?" That means
Mm.
nothing to you, right? So it's true, but it's not relevant for you.
You're the way I guess I'd paraphrase it is you're getting them attached to the result, right?
100%.
So, right. So you're finding something in them, on them, something with them that can attach to the results that you're going to be providing with that response. I love it. I
Yeah,
mean, now let's rewind. Let's go back to a young Pete.
sure.
Who was a young Pete? Was he great with kind of social cues? Was he great with communication? Was he an entrepreneur? Who was young Pete?
Young Pete, or as some of my friends used to call me, Pete the Geek. Young Pete was just like a skinny, scrawny computer nerd that was super introverted and that would rather be, writing code or pushing pixels on a computer or playing a video game. And just at every chance I had, just staying away from people in conversations like the ones we're having right now. Young
Oh,
Pete would look at Pete today and go, "I don't like that guy. He scares me." So yeah, that was young Pete. I was super, super introverted, huge tech geek, huge design geek from the time I was like a young kid. Believe it or not, how I actually got into marketing was that I wanted to be a game designer. So I taught myself how to code at a really, really, really young age, and I was building software and apps, and thought I was going to go be, the next big game designer and make video games. And then through a sort of interesting twist of fate, ended up sticking around here on the East Coast and kind of discovered marketing, working for a really, really big sports marketing company. You may or may not have heard of the television show ESPN. So did a lot of work with those folks early on in my career, and it afforded me a lot of opportunities to be able to take what was a lot of the big shows, whether it's NCAA or NFL, and take a lot of these college programs in some cases or sports programs, and then take these people online. So I was building apps. I was using tools like Flash and interactive media to basically bring people online at the early stages of the internet. And that's sort of once I cut my teeth in marketing, which I wasn't typically drawn to, I realized like, oh wow, like having interactive storytelling on the internet can really move people, can really connect people. And I got that same sort of buzz that I got when I was like writing code or designing things and wanting to make video games. And really, if you think about it, like marketing is behavior change. You're designing, a mousetraps essentially that you're pulling people through. So yeah, that scratched the itch for me. And then from that point forward, I just, one thing led to another. And now here it is almost 20 years later, and I'm still in aspects of marketing and branding and whatnot.
what what pulled you from being an introvert to an extrovert? Because I mean, the stuff you're talking about in marketing, for the most part, it seems like you could still be behind the scenes and not be to the forefront. What was that trigger, or what was that transition? Was it a slow burn, or was it something that I got this new job, I have to be more of an extrovert?
I love that question. So I'm still not an extrovert. So for anyone watching the show, I'm still very much an introvert, right? So I'll probably say 10 words to my wife tonight, after we have dinner and whatnot, because now I'm going to sort of recharge by myself. I'm going to soak up some content, maybe do some reading or whatnot. So I'm still very much an introvert. But to answer your question more succinctly, what I would say is, as I rose through the ranks from a young designer and a young computer programmer or developer, as we call it, I started to need to interface with more senior clients, senior executives. And a big part of that was getting them to say yes to certain programs, right? So if I was pitching a concept or an idea, I would have to build a pitch deck. And now instead of just letting my work sell itself, I would have to get up in front of people. And a lot of those decisions happen in the boardrooms or in the conference rooms. So I had to get articulate at public speaking and presenting myself and selling myself and the ideas that I was getting behind. Because what I realized was there's the people in the room that were able to do that, and their ideas kept going forward. And then I had what I thought were some pretty good ideas, and they were always getting shot down. What I realized was that the work doesn't sell itself. And being able to take people through that journey and understand how to do that. So that's where a lot of those skills of public speaking, presenting really kind of became a big part of my repertoire. And now I run a 50+ person consultancy, and I'm not sort of as hands-on as I once was when I was more of a practitioner. Now I'm leading people. And I think when you're leading people, it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of external facing communications. Whereas in the early onset of my career, I was spending, 90% of my time behind a screen. Well, we're all behind screens now because of COVID, right? But you know what I mean? I think we're a lot more front facing now as consultants and executives, as opposed to individual contributors who are more so behind the scenes, kind of making the magic happen.
Did you take classes, or was it a trial and error of presenting? What was that process like? Or was it just learning from other people in the office and kind of asking how they did or what they did?
Oh, by all means, it was making a complete and utter fool of myself way too many times. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember my business partner. So I have a co-founder in my core business, Digital Surgeons. And the joke I always make is we would be in a meeting and I would get all fired up and excited about something, kind of like I am right now. And he would be kicking me under the table, like, shut up, shut up, shut up. Because his role was mostly business development. So whenever I was sort of getting off on a tangent, he would just kick me to kind of get me to shut up. But yeah, I think to answer your question, a lot of trial and error. I'm very big into research. So, the thing I tell people a lot is I think I've read most of the New York Times bestselling kind of business books in the past like 10 years. So a lot of books talk about how to, books like Resonate by Nancy Duarte, who's an amazing and incredible articulate. She kind of breaks down the science of presentation design. She's written a lot of interesting books about that topic. I've taken some classes on public speaking, in and around, like, they give you a prompt and you have to kind of stand up and do stuff. So I didn't do Toastmasters, but I did a few things like Toastmasters, which is sort of a more locally known type of flavor. But even like being at like pitch competitions. So like I remember early in my career, when we first started the business, we had tiny clients, right? A lot of small businesses. And I was going to like Chamber of Commerce events when I was like in my early 20s. I started this business when I was like 19 years old. So I remember going to like these chamber networking groups, and someone would come up to me and they were like an insurance agent or a financial planner or whatever. And they'd be like, "Hey, what do you do?" And I'll be like, I make websites, or whatever. And nowadays it's a whole different ball, kind of game. But that was sort of me in the early days. So I hope that answers the question.
No, it definitely does. Now, you're growing inside a company, you're growing inside a business. When did the itch to actually start your own thing? You said you started something in 19. So did you have your business at 19, or was it?
Awesome question. Yeah, great question. So when I was working for a corporation, one of the things that was a really great piece of advice that I had was any of the freelance gigs I was doing, a really good colleague that I used to work with back in the day, he said, hey, if you get your own LLC, you can start writing off expenses, right? Because, I was buying laptops, I was buying software, lots of things to be able to do my job. And he's like, hey, if you have an LLC, you can start to kind of write off these expenses that you have for the people you're working with and whatnot. Because, I had contractors I was using when I had too much work and I needed to kind of have them help me out with stuff. So that happened. And then to answer your question, there was this moment, this spark that kind of hit me where I was like, I see a world where, so really the impetus behind it, just to be specific, was I was in a place where I was really good at design and really good at development. The developers loved me because I could build the crazy designs that the designers had because I was very design inclined. The designers loved me because I could deal with the engineers. So at the time, it's not really like rare now. Everyone's hybrid, full stack this, full stack that. But back then, it was really rare to be hybrid. It was either you did this or that. And sort of a mantra I have in life is we shouldn't label ourselves with or, we should label ourselves with and. Because if we sort of show up with our full selves, that really unlocks a lot of potential in what we can or can't do. So to answer your question, when I made the distinction that I didn't want to be one thing or the other, at the time my bosses were like, hey, do you want to work in this group or in that group? I'm like, well, I don't want to work in one of the groups. I want to work with both the groups. And that really wasn't an opportunity. So I knew that there was a small window of time where I had to pick left door or right door. And I was like, that's just not going to work for me. So I had the LLC, Digital Surgeons, I was a solopreneur in the beginning, just me. And I had this really interesting conversation with someone where they said, hey, if you go to your boss and convince them to give you a vendor application process, if you get on the vendor list, then you can do all the same work you're doing right now, but through your company, and you wouldn't need to be a W-2 full-time employee. Now, again, it's 2022. Everyone these days has a side hustle. Everyone these days wants to be an entrepreneur like you and I, right? But back then it was really rare. So what I did then was once I started generating enough income in the business, which we would call today a side hustle, but back then it was just me making cool shit. Hopefully it's cool to swear. And then after that, I just sort of left corporate, if you will, left full-time employment, and I never looked back. I've been self-employed now since 2004. So that I love that lifestyle. I love what that's afforded me in terms of creative freedom and the ability to start businesses, invest in businesses, and kind of really make my own wins and accept my own losses.
Going back to the idea that one of your friends gave you or one of your colleagues about getting the vendor list, to be on the vendor list, what was the response from your boss when you were saying, hey, I don't want to be part of the company, but I still want to do the same thing. I want to do it outside as a 1099. I mean, what was that response like?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to out him by name, but what I will tell you is what happened in meetings. So the first thing was he told me all the reasons I was making a big mistake, that I was young and I didn't know what I was doing. And, this is one of the biggest companies in the world and all this other stuff. And then after I was sort of like really scared because, it's like I'm this young guy. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like ruining my life at this moment. And then he sort of paused, calmed down. And then he sort of looked at me and he said, I'm not surprised by this. And I said, really? And he's like, yeah, every time I've ever given you a deadline, he's like, I gave you a deadline that I was expecting to take 8 weeks. He's like, and you did it in 5 days. He's like, so, and there's a whole long rationale behind that. Basically, previously they were working with a lot of offshore vendors and doing things across seas. And people think you save money by going overseas, but a lot of times what gets lost in translation or different things take longer, blah, blah, blah. So I was really fast. I love what I did. I was pretty much living off Starbucks and Red Bull. So I just never turned off. Like, I was hustle all the time. I love what I did. It was sort of, there was no difference for me at the time in work and life. I was constantly in that making cool shit for the internet. So when he said that, he saw that in me and he was like, I'm not surprised by this. He's like, I think this is going to actually afford you a lot of opportunities. He's like, just make me one promise. Can we still keep working together? He's like, because once you get on the vendor list, they're going to keep throwing work at you from all these other departments. And I really like working with you. So we ended up still working together for another couple of years. I'm really grateful for what happened there. And, there was just a lot of doors that got opened because once I started doing that work and winning awards, I was, 20, 21 years old. And someone's like, okay, so What brands have you worked with? And at the time had already worked with like some of the biggest brands in the world. So from there, I was like this young punk kid that was getting all these really cool projects that no one else was getting. And all my friends at the time that I had graduated college with, like they all had like corporate jobs or 9 to 5s, or they were chasing work. And like, I was working with, Lady Gaga, Kanye West, like big brand names. And people were like, Pete, how do you do what you do? And I'm like, just love what you do. You'll never work a day in your life, man. And that was sort of the advice I've lived by, and it's kept me going this long. So
Do you think that boss at that time, if they would have just left it at the negative of telling you all what you're doing wrong instead of going, but it doesn't surprise me, do you think you would have stayed at that company, or did that little surprise me thing really push you over the edge?
So the easiest way to answer that question is like, I probably would have told that person where to go, because
Okay.
the reality is like, I didn't need their money, right? I was making so much money with my side hustles. I was driving a BMW in high school, right? Like I didn't need the money because like I was an early student of the internet, right? So
Right.
it's like, I could code in 8 languages by the time I was 15, 16 years old. And like, I'm not
Wow.
saying that to be braggadocious. I'm saying that because when everybody was out, dating and getting laid and going to parties, I was in my parents' basement, like with acne all over my face, just like coding my face off. So I put the time in, and I think that like what I sacrificed in maybe kind of like my teenage and my early 20s. I tell people like 20s are for learning, 30s are for earning, 40s and 50s and on are for giving back. So I definitely I've walked that walk since my whole life. But yeah, I didn't need the money working with that group. So if my boss was not supportive of it, I was going to move on and do something different, because I wasn't going to let myself get pigeonholed into one thing. I had too many passions, too many hobbies. I really fancy myself a polymath, and I think that that's really what's driven that whole big sort of and concept versus an or concept that I've built my businesses on.
Now you talked about it, I think before, that you had a co-founder,
Mhm.
right, for Digital Surgeons.
Yep.
Now, when you originally started it in, I guess, when you were 19, the
Mhm.
LLC, it was still the co-founder, or was it just you at
It
that
was
time?
just me. So I was a solopreneur. So I went from DBA to LLC, and I was a solopreneur for a couple of years. And then what was happening, and why I brought on that co-founder, just to sort of give you the backstory,
Mhm.
was I got to a point where I was very good at the craft, right? I was really good at designing, coding, solving problems creatively. I was not great at the things you mentioned before. I was not great at public speaking. I couldn't sell anything. I was a terrible salesperson. I was always undervaluing myself, like I was doing jobs for like $500 or $1,000 that people were getting paid 10 grand for or more. Because I just love what I did, and I was ignorant. I was stupid, and then I met my co-founder, who his background's in business development and strategy and sales. And, um, we hit it off, kind of a, long-winded story that I don't know if we have time for today, but I think high level, basically, he was like, I really see the value in what you're doing. I can sell this. And I have some, big clients and big companies that I work with. At the time, he was working for a search engine optimization company, which was pretty big here on the East Coast. And he was like, all right, like, how about I walk you into some deals? We'll do a test partnership. I think we agreed to do like a partnership for like 3 months or something like that. And, test it out. And, we went in there 50-50 partners. And here we are 16 years later, still partners. We've invested in a dozen companies or so together. We own a couple that we own and operate, and it worked out. So, not all marriages end up that way. I think, it certainly didn't come easy. But yeah, no, in the beginning, it was just me. And then over time, when we really took off, when we hit that hockey stick growth, I think what it came down to is when you focus on your zone of genius and the things that you're the best at and that you love to do, and you bring in other people who their zone of genius is maybe just your zone of incompetence or your zone of competence, that's where things really take off. So I think a lot of people focus on, they want 100% of a small pie. I want a really small percent of a very big pie. And that was my philosophy back then. I remember getting into like an argument with my father. My father's like, you're going to own 50% of your company. And I'm like, yeah, 50% of nothing's nothing, 100% of nothing's nothing. 50% of something. He didn't like that too much, but then again, that's a whole separate conversation for my therapist, probably.
No, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't want to give up something of the possibility of something bigger. But like he said, I mean, if you know your faults, it's sometimes easier to bring that other person on to help you out through those faults. Now, what would happen in the partnership, just because you've had such a great level of success with that partnership, when there was overlap? I mean, how would you guys work through, those issues or those items?
Well, I mean, I'll give you the no BS answer, which is a lot of times we would just fight like hell. I'll be honest. Like, look, the book would say, well, divide and conquer and, isolate the things that you do. And there's like all kinds of great advice, but the truth of the matter is we would just fight like hell. We'd work through it. I think, when we both started, we were much younger, at the time we were in our early 20s. Obviously you don't need an Instagram filter to tell I'm not in my early 20s anymore. Right. But yeah, no, jokes aside, I think we worked through it. What really happened, I think, is through a series of inflection points, good times and bad times, is you start to develop self-awareness as you become a more senior leader in an organization. And I think as we both developed self-awareness, what we realized is that while there were areas of overlap, when we sort of respected one another's kind of core areas and core competencies, we were able to sort of figure out what like a yin and yang kind of partnership and combination would look like. Believe it or not, there's not as many overlaps as you might think, because my background is in design, strategy, tech. His background is primarily in business development and strategy. So overlap certainly, because we're both doing business development related things. We're both doing leadership related things, but he's much more passionate about like media and growth hacking and social. I'm much more passionate about like design, branding, messaging, positioning. So there's overlap, but I think where we both add a lot of unique value is in respecting each other's lanes in the conversation. And I'd be full of shit if I told you it always worked. But I think because we had a friendship outside of work and we weren't just business partners, I think the friendship kind of helped the bonds stick together a lot of times. Like both of us have been through, getting married, having children, and we've had each other's back. And I think that that's really important is like, what breaks up most partnerships is communication, trust. Really, those are the two I'd say that really come up. And I think, I've never not trusted him. I don't think he's never not trusted me. That's always been the pillar of our relationship is trust. We know each other. Even in our worst days, we would never screw each other over. And we've got 16-year track record to back that. And then communication. Again, we've spent a lot of money on coaches. We spent a lot of money on different things to kind of improve that personally and professionally. But I think what it all comes down to for any leader of any company, size or shape, is you got to have self-awareness. Because the reality is, if you don't look in the mirror and are not focused on growth, it's really easy to get in your own way. And I've gotten them in my own way a number of times. I've fought hard and long over things that are just not worth fighting over. And I think as you get a little bit older, you get a little bit more tired, you get a little bit more jaded, you realize that know your place in the world, know your place in the business, and put that out there for you and your partners.
What do you think has been the biggest hiccup or hurdle you've had to kind of work through in building your brand?
So now when you say building the brand, you mean the company or you mean like my individual brand?
Yeah, I mean, either or.
Okay. I would say the biggest thing is so we're in the professional services, marketing, advertising industry by definition, if you were to like look at like SIC codes and all that. To answer your question, as a boutique, as a small scrappy upstart, you're competing against some of the biggest companies in the world. So I would say like as we were on the rise, when we started, we worked with a lot of small businesses, but over time, as we started working with the SMB, small to medium business, small to medium enterprise, now we're going after, giant. We have a couple of Fortune 50 clients that are like really big. So the competition is really, really stiff and challenging at that thing. When we're a 40 person, now about 50 people, 50 full-time, then we obviously have a flex network that flexes, but when you look at a 50-person shop competing against a 500-person or a 20,000-person shop, you have to really win as the underdog. And that means that I think you have to bring a different edge to the table. But the true reality of the situation is there's just some deals that we've lost, and people have told us, like, look, you guys are just too small. Like, if you were 100 people or 200 people, we would work with you in a second. We've heard that. And then in some cases, I remember when we were pitching Sharp, the television company and the electronics company, we were pitching against some of the biggest agencies in New York City, and we won. And I think the reason we won is that we tried harder and we came up with more fresh ideas that were fitting. We listened to the client more. A lot of the big shops kind of came in, they pounded their chest, they dropped their case study decks on the table, and we're like, we've worked with all these big brands. We've worked with JetBlue. We've worked with this. And I think that some people just see through that and they're like, that's ego. And we just went in there and we were like, look, we really want the opportunity to earn your business. Here's what you brought the problem. We listened really carefully. We quoted them based on little nuances that they said in meetings. We really listened. And then we came back with a solution that was going to help them build the brand and the business. And ultimately they chose us. And, because we knew what was riding on that, our reputation, we went a lot harder. We went the extra mile to make sure that we delivered those results, much like you in your business, right? Like one of the reasons that you're such a leader in your field is because, I did a little Googling on you before today. Like, your reputation is super high, right? Your relationships, people know you in your community, the impact you're making, the plaques on the wall, et cetera, right? Like these things credentialize you and make you a better fit. And I think that we did the same type of thing in our industry.
Where do you see your business, yourself? And I know we haven't even talked about it, and I don't know if we're going to dive too much into the other businesses you've built over the years, but where do you see personal business going in the next 5 years for yourself?
I love that question. So one of the things that I always had a knack for was seeing around corners and seeing how different things connect with one another. So the sort of designer and the problem solver in me mixed with like the logic brain of like a coder and that sort of thing sort of created some really interesting pathways. So I think what I see now is, like, for example, I'm a minority investor in a woman-led recruiting agency that I invested in. My partner and I are a minority investor in a professional services consulting firm, which is primarily focused on accountants, lawyers, engineering firms, right? Very niche business. That niche business needs people. So then that's connected to the recruiting company. So we're sort of in that arbitrage market. So if you think about the way that Amazon makes money, right? Amazon makes money a couple ways. They're in the business of marketplaces. So I think that most of our business that we started was professional services based, and professional services companies don't scale besides people. So because now we're building technology enabled companies, to answer your question, over the next 5 years, the investments we're making in these different companies, they have interconnections. So the arbitrage value that happens by connecting these different companies that are in our network, when those dots connect, you have arbitrage. So another one of the businesses we own and operate is a tech innovation campus. Inside of it, there's a co-working space that we own the property and the asset for. There's over 150 companies in there. So now we're networking with those companies when there's a lot of talent in those companies. So now instead of maybe hiring a full-time hire, which is hard to find, we can work with consultants that are part or contractors that are part of that network. So there's an arbitrage of that marketplace. So I think over the next 5 to 10 years, what I want my legacy to be about is being a force for positive change in people's lives and work. And I believe that the way we can do that is by sort of giving away our secret sauce. So we've open sourced a lot of the ways we do things. So like I'll charge $30,000 for a workshop, but if you want all the exercises and the games that we play in those workshops, you can get them online on our Think Forward website for free. Because the reality is, like, we feel like,
could you say that again?
Apparently Siri wants to talk to us.
Siri wants to know the secrets.
But yeah, stealing secrets. But yeah, no, I think to answer the question, it's about connecting dots. It's about creating additional value. And part of the mantra of designing demand is, I believe that we can create creative capital, and that creative capital helps businesses get the things that they need to grow. So that's sort of what the next 5 to 10 years looks like for me, is finding businesses that we can invest in, that we can sort of add leverage to, A great example of that is the cannabis business that we just recently launched called Hue. And part of our value prop was helping them differentiate in the market. Cannabis market's massively growing market, very, very, very commoditized, very, very busy. So we created a extremely premium high-end lifestyle brand, backed by some really smart founders that the company has, and they've got intellectual property that's fantastic. So we basically just wrapped that with a great brand experience. And now within a few months of it launching, it's taking off. So I'd imagine now, since we launched that, we'll get my partner runs the cannabis side of the business, because that's not really my practice. I'm more focused on future technology, Web3, that sort of thing now. But now we've probably gotten 30, 40 calls for other cannabis related businesses that want us to invest in them or partner with them because of just what we've done. So that's where I think that network effect is really an important thing for us. And why we've still kept the service business. A lot of people are like, wow, you guys have worked with so many software as a service companies. Some of them have IPO'd, some of them have sold, been acquired. Why don't you just go build one of those? And my partner and I's answer is, we love entrepreneurs. We love supporting entrepreneurs. And we have a very confident but respectful stance that we can design demand for any business, because we know what questions to ask to sort of find the force multiplier. So that's the next 5-10 years looks like. I'm excited to be able to teach people how we do more of it. We're talking about doing some online classes now that a company just came to us and wanted us to launch some online classes on what we do. So we're in talks to do that. So really just keep expanding, just keep doing, more of the things that create the impact. And I think it's one URL at a time. It's one business at a time. It's one step at a time.
Is there a must or a couple musts that a company must have that will say, okay, we can invest our time, money, whatever you're going to do to be a partner in their company?
So say more about that. I want to make sure I understand your question correctly.
Well, because I've had other consultants, and it's kind of on the podcast, where they invest basically their time, their expertise, whatever it might be, into the company, and that takes away from other avenues, right? Mm-hmm. So they're constantly getting fed different entrepreneurs. Hey, I'm looking to come over here. I want your help. I want your help. Yet every time you give a piece of yourself, you're also taking away from somewhere else, and the opportunity cost, right? Yep. So there's probably some things in your head, or me and your partner's head, that go, if we talk to this company, if they don't have this, I'm not going to even take it to the next step.
Yeah. So I love that question. Let me break that down really simply for you. So I think 95% of the deal flow that we see, we turn down. Mm-hmm. Based on, again, I'm looking at like HubSpot data and CRM data to kind of give you that number. But like, to answer your question, right? So there's two ways to play with us, right? One is hiring us as a consultancy or an agency, and that's a standard fee-based model. We can very quickly weed out if they have the kinds of budgets from a retained perspective that makes sense, if they have problems that we can help them with. We have a whole business development team that goes through that in a very respectful way. And if it's not a good fit, we always try to point them to someone who might be a good fit, because we want to add value and create relationships, because experiences build relationships and relationships build brands, which is our mantra. But to answer that question, that's one way to play. And the other way to play with us is through what we call a hybrid equity partnership. So that's typically, to answer your question, where we're coming in as advisors. We're also deploying our consultancy team against that. And that's typically going to be for like a single digit equity position in the company. Generally, those deals are ranging from $250,000 to $500,000 in value. And then that value is either done through a convertible note or some type of a hybrid deal flow structure, safe note or other. To answer the question, each of our evaluation criteria for both sides of what I just shared is really, really detailed. So the first thing we do is we have something we call the four green lights, which is like a framework that we run the company by. So if we can't get to 4 green lights with a prospect, which I'll explain in just a second, we won't work with them. And we share that up front. I've written an article about it, kind of published it openly, which makes the team happy. So the first green light is team satisfaction. We ask ourselves the question, is working with this client going to lead to the team feeling satisfied? whether that be like, are they going to treat our people well, right? Are these people assholes, right? In the biz dev process, we find that out really quickly. So is the work rewarding? Is the work, going to push the business forward from a team satisfaction perspective? The second green light is client satisfaction. Ultimately, can we help that client succeed based on the resources that we have? We can't help everybody because of some people like to work certain ways that just don't fit our ways of working. So second traffic light is client satisfaction. Third traffic light is really impact. Can the work that we do actually improve their business? So we're a digital first consultancy. If your business is not going to be able to grow rapidly because of digital related tactics or channels, we're probably not the best partner for you. So that third thing is we look at, can we actually move the needle? And do we have expertise that is close enough to be able to demonstrate that? For example, we turned down a biotech company the other day because, there's a lot of those in Connecticut. And it was because we're like, we don't know the first thing about pharma, blah, blah, blah. That's not our wheelhouse. And what you want us to do is not in our wheelhouse. So we would rather just turn down the things we can't deliver on that. So that third green traffic light's impact. And the fourth traffic light's profit. And the reason why the fourth traffic light's profit, which most people might be listening to being like, profit's your last KPI. Profit is a result, not a goal. And if you are entirely focused on profit, you're most likely not going to achieve the vision that you have as a company. So those are the four traffic lights. That's part of the evaluation criteria. Obviously, with that, we look at the scope of work, like what needs to happen, what people do we need to put on something to win, and will that fit into the budgetary threshold? So obviously, if I'm working with a Fortune 50, they might be paying us a few $100,000 a month in fees, versus if I'm working with a small startup founder, that might be mostly equity upfront and a limited cash amount upfront, because we're sort of banking on long-term future value, versus I can't get a Fortune 50 to give us a piece of their company, right? I wish they could. But yeah, so that's how we typically evaluate deal flow. And we see a lot of it. And I think what's been great about that network, to answer your original question about the 5 to 10 years, is because we have other people in the network. If it doesn't fit for us, we're able to pass it to one of the other sister companies that we have, or someone that we have a really great relationship with. Because I'm a firm believer that, the tide rises, the boats rise with it. So
if someone's listening right now and they're looking to see if they would fit into either of those buckets with your company, what would be the best way of them reaching out or finding more information?
So our website probably would be digitalsurgeons.com is a really good place to start. We just recently made some upgrades to it where we're publishing a lot more content on the thoughts section. There's some case studies there. So I would say if the case studies feel like things that are exciting to the people that are interested in potentially working with us, and then head on over to the contact form. Generally we get back to people same day or very quickly. We have a really talented business development group that will get back to you. We'll give you, ask honest questions and give you honest answers very, very quickly to see if there's a fit. And again, if it's not a fit, we always try to point you in the direction of somewhere you can, because, we're relationship first.
And I'm going to just finish it off. And I thank you for all your time. Finish off with this last question. What would your current self tell your younger self that true? I mean, I know you're an introvert still, and they were probably a little more so back in the day. What would you tell that person?
That's a good one. I like that question a lot. What I would say probably to my younger self is, don't be afraid to be vulnerable in the things that you don't know or the things that you're afraid of. I think growing up, an 80s baby, I was very much sort of like overwired in the, Rocky Balboa, Arnold Schwarzenegger type of kind of toxic masculinity culture that gets a lot of shit these days. But what that sort of, I think, embedded in me, being the son of an Italian American and those things, is it embedded, I think, a sense of like toughness and bravado that didn't make me vulnerable to admitting the things I didn't know. So I made a lot of dumb mistakes that could have been prevented if I just asked more questions, or I didn't act like a know-it-all. So that's a big piece of advice I wish my younger self had. I wish Brene Brown met me when I was 19 and smacked me around, because if that Netflix special was around, I probably would be a whole whole lot different Pete today, but I think it was those trials and tribulations that helped me realize that we all fall down, we all make mistakes, we all have to go through this, through a lot of the similar struggles and the impact that it has on us, mentally or emotionally. So that's what I think my present day self would say to my younger self, and would have probably helped me in a lot of ways.
Well, thank you, Pete, for being here. Hopefully everyone listening got some great nuggets. I mean, yes, if Pete probably didn't say that he was still an introvert, the way he's communicated, the way he's been so open, you probably go, no, he's an extrovert. But, just like on social media, you only see a glimpse into someone's life, and you don't know what they're dealing with, right? So even though he's outgoing personality, this is going to have a ripple effect the rest of the day, the rest of the week. So whatever you're dealing with, and you're listening right now and you're dealing with, don't worry, you're not alone. There's someone else out there that's probably going through the same stuff that you're going through. Thank you guys. Please subscribe, please share, and go find Pete. All Pete's information, Digital Surgeon, is in the show notes. So easy, just a click away. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Vinny.